It's Christmas time, and if there's one iconic film that truly stands the test of time as being one of the greatest Christmas movies of all time, it has to be Home Alone. Sure, there are plenty of other films that tackle Christmas more directly, with all of those adaptations of Santa Claus helping spread presents around or whatever, but few truly click onto the same wavelength that Home Alone hits when it comes to its unique mashup of black comedy with slapstick physics, childlike fantasy, and a wholesome story about family over the Christmas holiday. Not to mention, it's meticulously dipped in nostalgia to make sure viewers will always come back to it every year. But there's more to the Home Alone story. There's a small little blip on the Home Alone radar that many of us choose to ignore, pretend it doesn't exist, and bury deep into the basement, never to be confronted and revealed again. And that, of course, is the Home Alone movies nobody talks about. Home Alone 1 is the classic foundation, starring Macaulay Culkin, hosting all sorts of unforgettable lines, beats, and moments, and generally being a pretty flawless film. The sequel then expands on much of that same formula with the same cast popping up, with some extra extensions with hotel villain Tim Curry and the President of the United States making a cameo appearance. But then, Home Alone 3 happened, and the Home Alone franchise died. And then they made another, and apparently another one in 2012 too. Oh god. Well, you may have known that all three exist, but I highly doubt that you want to sit down for 6 hours and consume them all. But don't worry, I did it for you. Today we're going to be looking too far ahead to the latter Home Alone films and what made them so flawed. Chances are we'll never get another great Home Alone movie or anything, but we can at least point and laugh in the face of those that tried so hard to make more money off a tradition that really needed to be left alone. So since we're only just starting up in this 5-movie comparison, setup is very important. On the YouTube side of things, we're going to be tackling all movies simultaneously to see how each take on certain key elements of the Home Alone formula. Starting with, very fittingly, the setup of each film. So we all know the first two films, right? Home Alone 1 has Kevin McAllister accidentally left behind after the family rush off to go on holiday. In the second, it's him again joining them a little bit further, but being detoured in the airport and left alone in New York. Generally, they're pretty samey, same people, same concept, all accidental and kinda insinuating bad parenthood. It's just an unfortunate collection of factors that push everything together. The future films, however, don't like this approach. Home Alone 3 stars new kid Alex Pruitt and his new family, which is much more compact than the extended McAllister collective. Oh hey, it's Scarlett Johansson. His parents are simply hard workers with big events going on right now while he's got the chicken pox. So he's home alone all day with an illness whilst the family returns every evening. Kinda takes away an element of the Home Alone feel when they're just returning each night, but hey, it's refreshing. Home Alone 4 then goes off the deep end. There is no Alex Pruitt and there's no Macaulay Culkin either. But the characters are the same. This guy now is Kevin McAllister. The family is compact again, but there's Buzz, and that's Megan. You're making sense of this, right? Well, it goes even further now as the parents are getting a divorce, and Kevin chooses to spend Christmas with his dad over his mum. There he gets to handle a big fancy mansion with voice recognition and 2 fancy staff members as well. And a pretty pompous stepmother. You can start to see there's flaws already, but opening up a big mansion with rich gear is a new direction. And then there's Home Alone 5, released a whole 21 years after the first. It's modern-ish day. Now we have a new family moving into a new home, and 2 kids are left home alone, Finn and Alexis Baxter, as a snowstorm blocks the parents out. This house is big, seemingly haunted, and has a secret basement compartment at the bottom. Now that's just the setup of the families, and you can already feel a lot of interesting new directions the franchise plays with. Judging by that alone, it almost doesn't sound too bad either. Home Alone 1 gives us a big fancy mansion which worked great, but small house, tech mansion and haunted mansion are somewhat twists, and the family dynamics mean casting less people, which I guess is a win. Also, if you've made it this far, then why not subscribe? I know if you're not subscribed, and I have a lot of non-subscribers watching, so go subscribe. Thank you, let's continue. But where we really go off the deep end is the villains concept. Home Alone 1 had Harry and Marv, a classic duo of clowns wanting to rob houses for money. Easy to grasp, fun to watch, and they make simple sense. Home Alone 2 brings them back, wanting revenge and stealing again. And it gives us some hotel staff as well. But Home Alone 3? What could be wrong with Home Alone 3, you ask? Well, I can explain it all with just one line.
We think he intercepted a top-secret electronic device stolen from a Defense Department contractor by a group of international criminals working for a North Korean terrorist organization.
Yeah. Believe it or not, this film actually has the same writer as the first two, but the director and composer had dropped out at this point. And you can kinda tell. Home Alone 3 has 4 thieves, that's right, 4 thieves! Peter Boper, Alice Ribbons, Burton Jernigan, and Earl Unger. Don't worry, I'm not able to keep up with them either. And it doesn't help that they're all similar looking too. So the reasoning behind their story is that they're after a chip that can control missiles and own the world. They accidentally lose it in luggage at an airport, which ends up in Alex's possession. The thieves come to the suburb and search through all 14 houses there trying to find it. And twist, they attack in broad daylight because in the suburbs, everyone's out in the day. Cool. Already a little bit lengthy there, so here's Home Alone 4. Home Alone 4 has Marv return. But it's not Daniel Stern either, and he's not with Harry, though he mentions him a lot. He's with his now wife Vera. They want to kidnap the prince who's guest appearing at the rich mansion on Christmas Day, and they're backed up by an inside man in the staff department. Also note that Kevin knows Marv from last time, which only adds more questions since this is the first reboot we've seen with all of these actors. Home Alone 5 does its own thing with the thieves being an old man Sinclair, a doting woman Jessica, and a black safecracker Hughes. I never actually managed to pick up their names while I was watching this film, but hey, it's slightly more diverse with gender and race being represented. They're after a lost painting worth $85 million hidden in the empty house, with the old man being directly connected to the painting. In concept, I guess it's not that bad. It's easy to follow and fairly simple too. But of course the idea isn't the make or break of a good film, and considering these are sequels, half the idea is already melded from the original, so we're going to move on to presentation next, which has quite a few sub-elements. So as we mentioned before, these later films aren't created by the same guys as the original. That's pretty obvious, I'd say. With Chris Columbus only directing 1 and 2, and John Hughes writing the first 3, and credited for the characters of 4. Score composer John Williams also dropped out after 2. So how does this meld in practice with the later films? Well, the original film and 2 were meticulously filmed with a tactic in mind. It was literally built to be as nostalgic as possible, reaching into childhood innocence and fantasy with low camera angles, childish activities, and a message that all can feel through either excitement or memories of their own past. What's the very first thing OG Kevin does when he's home alone? He goes crazy with the freedom he wants. Not only because the writers clicked into the wonders of what a kid would do, but it also links into his story about falling out with his family and getting what he wants. Similarly, 2 has Kevin manipulating the world of New York around him with confidence. And this is one of the first steps that I feel the future films really missed out on. Home Alone 3's Alex is home alone sick, and though he never acts ill throughout the entire film, he's also not bouncing around either. When free, he's not particularly looking forward to it and simply plays calmly in the attic with his rat and telescope until he spots the thieves in another house. Home Alone 4 does have that excitement over the new expensive tech of the mansion, which is good, though whether through directing choices or through bad acting, it doesn't really sell nearly as well as the first and feels a mighty bit shorter as well. Home Alone 5 has none of that excitement as the kids are glued to their devices doing the same as usual. That kid wonder is lost on them for a more realistic approach to always being able to do what they wanted beforehand. So there already is where most of these films fall short at an early step. These films have little nostalgic factor to them because the universal feeling of freedom and ecstasy is lost on that childhood innocence. But of course, there's more. Let's move back to those thieves. Harry and Marv have a great dynamic and chemistry between the two of them, with the evil smart man and the goofy sidekick, who balances being funny yet not annoying perfectly. You can tell who's who when there's just 2 thieves, and generally they're fun to watch in every scene they're in. Home Alone 3 is a villainous mess. With 4 characters, it's hard to follow character traits and relationships. For the longest time, I thought the dynamic was Mother Bear and her 3 boys going forwards, but it turns out this guy is the leader. Both him and the girl are pretty serious, whilst they are clearly less so, and I have no idea what to think of this guy. Is he in the middle or something? I guess they just duplicated Harry and Marv to get 2 of each, without the positive traits? Cause also there's very little jokes between them all, and they certainly have no chemistry. But if that's bad, then just listen to Home Alone 4. With it being Marv in charge, the goof is set to only continue, with Vera being dumber than Marv. A real Dumb and Dumber story here. And you know how I mentioned OG Marv balanced annoyance well? These guys don't, being intense slapstick melted down for 4-year-olds. There is also the staff member being the straight man Harry type, but she doesn't redeem the film. And Home Alone 5 was almost good. It did several parts so right. You can tell who's who, their character traits are clear, and you can understand their motivations and thoughts. But man, are some of those traits bad. The old man is great, he's focused on the task and evil-ish. But the other two are comic reliefs done poorly. The doting woman is constantly crying over an ex, be it through remembering him in a conversation or on the phone, and the safecracker is new at this and dumb enough to eat food, which is fine, and shout out loud to see if anyone's in. Pushing a little beyond Marv levels of annoying, and together they're just a pain to witness. Plus, pretty stereotypical too, which isn't too great. Part of the joy of the first films is enjoying the villains just as much as the good guys. Every scene with Marv and Harry, or Mr. Hector and Cedric, were fantastic to watch. But by dropping the ball on half the main characters, all 3 super sequels lose a massive piece of the original successes. And I've been trying to avoid it as best I can, but I gotta mention it eventually. The acting. Home Alone 1 is goofy. It was directed to be goofy. Frantic classical music, unrealistic direction to sell an iconic line. And of course, the physics. But the acting behind it all, despite the wacky world, is what really elevates these films to age so well. Macaulay Culkin is a great child actor with a fantastic scream that certainly isn't underused. And the thieves perfectly balance serious plans with funny dialogue, comedic timing, and goofy responses when the time comes. Again, when it comes to those screams, they are on point and fully utilized. The future films miss out on this massively and is probably one of the biggest flaws. Home Alone 3 has Alex, who's docile, blank-slated, and not one for screaming. Apparently, he's just never really scared. And the villains, well, they're pretty serious, lack chances for comedic timing, and when it does come to those screaming moments and reactions, something feels a little underdone. Home Alone 4 perhaps noticed this, and so on the directing side of things decided to turn up the goofiness to ungodly levels. The kid is pretty standard. I only ever really felt true joy in the shot of him with the spinning chair, but the thieves are too much. Far too much. Even on their first attempt to approach the mansion, it's crazy over the top and pretty unfunny too. Any tension from the first film is lost for dumb spectacle. And that kind of directing just makes for seemingly bad acting. How many times can you fall over from spraying water? Apparently that's your answer. It started on showers which weren't manipulated to spray forwards or anything, so it doesn't even make sense as a trap. This kid is also never scared, but I guess that kind of makes sense this time around. And then Home Alone 5 took note of that and did the complete opposite, with the complete opposite results. It's 90% realistic. The 2 comic reliefs are outliers that don't look too good, and the thieves are frozen at the end. Everything else is pretty real. Both the reactions, traps, and physics are completely toned down to what can be done. The only fantasy element is the time-lapse effect on the trap making, removing any of the childhood wonder of the first film with fun silhouette tricks or the over-the-top bombastic fun of explosives or face crushing, whilst other films overdo the goofiness in a poor way that lacks comedic timing or general entertainment for anyone above the age of 6. So I've been touching on jokes a lot, but let's properly focus on them now. Home Alone 1 and 2 are a comedy, you can tell, from the subtle lines at the start,
When I grow up and get married, I'm living alone!
to the slapstick of the villains that honestly I probably don't even need to show you footage of, you know what I'm talking about. Home Alone 3 gets too confused in its plot to be funny. I like one joke at the airport.
Miami, New York, and Denver lounges. Nothing.
Bars, restaurants, club lounge, clean.
When I was in the John, I didn't see anything in there.
But beyond that, it attempts to reform jokes and fails. Here's another clip.
Marv! Harry?
how'd you take your shoes off?
Why the hell you dressed like a chicken?
You got a haircut?
Nope. And then there's the adult jokes that are just terrible on their own and poorly hidden too. Here's one of Home Alone 2's adult jokes.
He says if I walked in there and saw him naked, I'd grow up never feeling like a real man.
And here's Home Alone 3.
Alex slammed the toilet seat down on his thing again.
Bullseye. I'm innocent.
My kid slammed the toilet seat on this thing again.
Just asinine in that writing room. Home Alone 4 is all goof, but the jokes in it aren't any good. Most come from Marv and Vera's lack of smarts, and none really fly, especially when they're over-explained.
3 words, Vera. Kid, nat, thing.
I think there's only one more.
I do love watching her hyperventilate. It's one of the few pleasures of this job.
Is that meant to be a joke? That's absolutely horrible. She's not that bad a character, my god. And Home Alone 5 very much has the same problem. There are jokes, but none of them are really good or smart like the originals. My favourite is the overused tropey one.
Yeah, well, the deal's changed now since the ghost. 50% for me, 50% for Jessica, 25% for you.
But reused jokes aren't good jokes. So for a moment, let's go back to the good old days again and talk about motifing. It's not usually talked about all too much, but can be pretty important or cool when it comes to sequels, and there's some interesting connections to how each film tackles the original film's motifs. So what I really mean by motifs is formula. There's several elements from the original that are picked up and sprinkled across the different films. Obviously, the main theme was dropped after the first 2 films, with Home Alone 4 really spitting on the score with this terrible, goofy xylophone track that just ruins everything about the Home Alone tone, god. But no, formula. For example, Home Alone 1 and 2 foreshadow all sorts of trap assets for later use, with the TV and the voice recorder being the most obvious. The other films miss out on this, with Home Alone 5 doing the closest job showing the safe beforehand. The building factors of circumstances is lost on later films too, with each next one having parents going to events and once struggling to get back, removing a lot of the loneliness tension. Kevin being a criminal does copy over kinda once, but that's about it. But oddly enough, the element of giving out advice and helping out a third-party character appears in all 5 films. I guess that's the one linking piece beyond the title. The middle films also create their own formula of having the parents shoot down their kids for crying wolf, though I guess that's kind of connected to how Kevin got told off twice in the first 2 films. But my personal favourite connection is in the very last one, where the painting being stolen was supposedly created by the same artist who painted The Scream, connecting the films to the posters of all of the films with that iconic look. Wow, that's pretty smart. And wow, you can see the acting quality as it goes further and further along time. Where are those eyebrows? Lift those eyebrows, man! You're even a man, this photo doesn't do you justice. Alright, we're coming to the last part of the video, so much like the films, let's show off the traps finally, shall we? They're the part that we come back to the films for anyway. Everything else is just a nice bonus. Home Alone 1 had illusions, trickery, ice, fire, and pranks. Home Alone 2 had drops, electricity, drops, explosion, drops, and drops, but my god, it was funny to watch. Every other trap kinda sucks. Home Alone 3 had glue, water, electricity, lawnmowers, drops, and illusions, which isn't actually too bad, but none of it is very iconic. Home Alone 4 had water and pots and pans and automatic doors. Meh. And Home Alone 5 had boots, snow, and luck. But hey, they made fun of the ice and then paid it off with the police, which was pretty good. Otherwise, literally it's just the thieves confusing themselves more than the kid. This, I think, is the other major misstep. It's pretty obvious. The traps are the best bit, and these films really have a lackluster and undercooked finale sequence. Add on to the lack of comedic timing with it all, and it's just a rehashed reimagining with less imagining. I mean, just look at Marv's responses to the next brick each time in the second film. Here, you can really feel the beats of the film. Everything else misses this entirely. Another spanner in the works for the traps is how they're approached. Harry and Marv split up, combine, and continue, which is great. The Korean terrorist group attacked from 4 angles, which is incredibly hard to follow simultaneously and only overcomplicated the film further. Martha and Vera stick together and are foiled in very uninteresting ways, and the art thieves slowly split up and struggle when combined, but with the minimal traps, it just loses any magic or joy that it could have had. But beyond all of that, forget the setup, the characters, the scenarios, the directing, or the acting, forget the formula, the jokes, the soundtrack, the iconic scenes, or the traps. There is one final massive thing that really shows why every future Home Alone movie has failed. And that is, simply enough, these are not Christmas films. They are just films that take place during Christmas. They have no Christmas message. Home Alone 1 is all about falling out with family, not wanting them, maturing as a person, and learning that Kevin does in fact want his family for Christmas. Nothing else matters. The same returns for number 2. Relationships and connections along the way are what matters. These films are all about the values of Christmas, and they're explained especially clear through Kevin asking God for his family back both times. You can bet that Kevin became a devout Christian considering God literally answered his prayers twice. Home Alone 3? Alex doesn't have a want for his family. He does his own thing, knowing that they'll just be back at nighttime. His family rush to his safety once they know, but it's just a broad happy ending. Home Alone 4? Isn't really about Christmas as much as it is about real family and about reuniting his real mother and father. He misses them being together, but they mostly just get together by chance. There's an element of preferring the personal element of Christmas over the material, but it isn't sold all too well. And also the stepmother's not really evil, she's just new and unattached to kids. But still, she gets everything stripped of her. It kind of felt cruel when I watched it again. And then in Home Alone 5, the kids really couldn't care less about family. They fell out at the start, had their devices, fought off the thieves, though were pretty scared about it, and were relieved once it was done. But didn't exactly learn that they wanted their parents for Christmas. They were almost a little too old for it anyway. Still, yeah, the happy ending is that they got material at the end. Ah well, it could have been worse. There'll probably be another one another day. But that is many of the reasons why these are the Home Alone films that nobody talks about. 28 years after the first film's legacy, and the franchise continues to glow each year. Maybe for the 30th anniversary, Macaulay Culkin will cameo in the next one. That could perhaps give it a bit more weight, though the modern day approach definitely adds more spanners into the mix. I guess Home Alone 4 got you there already. If a Home Alone film can hit childhood innocence, well foreshadowed and wrapped up assets, fun, goofy yet not annoying characters, easy to follow plot lines, enjoyably large traps with great responses and comedic timing, all ribboned up in the message of the true meaning of Christmas, then, and only then, will we have another great Home Alone movie. But I think I would prefer, and everyone else the same, that they just leave Home Alone alone. For now though, keep the change, you filthy animal. My name's been Dazz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit. You know, I always avoid the Home Alone movies every Christmas. I kinda got sick of it, but now I've watched all 5 in one binge watch this year. Now I can say that I'm done with Home Alone movies, right? Yeah, we'll see.